From Eyewitness News, this is Newsmakers.
It was another challenging year for the Roman Catholic Church in Rhode Island. In July, the Providence Diocese published a list of dozens of priests who'd been credibly accused of sexual abuse since 1950, refocusing attention on a scandal that's consumed the church for years. And ahead of a visit last month to confer with Pope Francis, diocesan leaders published startling new statistics showing a huge drop-off in mass attendance since the year 2000. What did the Holy Father advise, and what will 2020 hold for Rhode Island's most influential religious institution? This week on Newsmakers, the Roman Catholic Bishop of Providence, Thomas Tobin.
Welcome to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. Joining me on the program, Eyewitness News reporter Ted Nesi. Bishop Thomas Tobin, it's good to have you back on the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Good morning and Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas to you. And to my friends at home, sorry for my voice. It's that time of year, so dulcet tones of Tim White here. So Bishop, every few years, bishops are required to make a trip to Rome called Ad Limina. In November, you did that and met with Pope Francis. I was curious if this was the first time you've met him in person.
Yes, it is the first time I've met Pope Francis in person. It was my fifth Ad Limina visit, once as an auxiliary bishop in Pittsburgh and twice from Youngstown, now the second time from Providence. So it was a wonderful trip, but it was my first opportunity to meet and greet Pope Francis in person.
What were your impressions of him? What was he like?
Very impressive. You know, we had a wonderful opportunity, and we met as a group of bishops with the Holy Father. There were 20 some of us, I believe, and we met in a group in a discussion with him in the Apostolic Palace for over 2 hours. So it was an amazing opportunity, and the impressions were very positive, very strong. Gosh, he was relaxed. He was very humble. He was very humane. He just entered into a good conversation, as he said, with his brother bishops, with his fellow bishops. So, and he was very clear at the very beginning. He said, I don't have a speech to give. I don't have an agenda to follow today. He said, this is your opportunity. He said, whatever you want to ask about, questions, issues, if you want to criticize the Pope, that's okay too, he said, because we learn when we are criticized, as long as it's done respectfully.
Well, was there a main theme that came out of that from the bishops to the Pope then? It
was all over the place, and actually we just had a chance, if we wanted to say something or ask something, put up our hands, and then he had a translator with him because he was speaking in Italian, and then the translator was going back and forth from Italian to English, but it was all over the place. We spoke about immigration, we spoke about evangelization, we talked about some liturgical questions. So it was just about almost everything that's a current issue in the church today came up in the discussion, including some more personal things. One of the bishops reflected upon the Year of Mercy that Pope Francis instituted a couple years ago, and what a wonderful impact that had in his particular diocese, especially with confessions and sacrament of reconciliation. The one question I asked of the Pope, I said, Holy Father, not too many years ago, you were in our position. You were sitting on this side of the desk visiting another Pope with your Ad Limina visit from Argentina. I said, what was that like for you, and what should we expect from our Ad Limina visit? So it was a chance for him to reflect a little bit on his experience as a diocesan bishop as well.
Did you feel the bishops, and maybe not just in this visit, but in previous Ad Liminas you've done, are they candid with the Pope, or is it kind of like, you know, when your boss calls you in for how are we doing, and you say, oh, everything's great, even though you know there's griping behind the scenes?
Sure. I think the bishops were very candid. Now again, it's somewhat of a limited conversation because you're not one-on-one with him, you know, in a conference setting for 2 hours. It's a group discussion, so you have to respond to the other bishops and listen to them as well. But I think the bishops felt very candid, and apparently some of the Ad Limina visits after ours, and we were the first in the country from New England. They've had 5 or 6, I think, since then. Some of the other bishops have also been very candid in asking specific questions and so forth. But yeah, I think the bishops felt very comfortable, and the Pope did everything he could to welcome us and to make us feel comfortable and just to enter into that kind of conversation. You didn't get a sense at all that the Pope is some kind of ideologue that sometimes he's portrayed as in Catholic culture or in common culture today in the media, but you get a sense this man has very deep convictions, but he's very comfortable with those. He doesn't want to fight with people. He doesn't want to challenge people in a negative sense. Just a man who's very comfortable in his own skin and deeply believes what he believes and wants to share that vision with others.
It was a whole week of visits. The Pope, I'm sure, was a highlight, but you were in Vatican office. There were masses, of course, but then you were in Vatican offices talking to different officials. I'm curious, outside of the visit with the Pope, what was the most interesting thing you heard or learned, or something that might have changed your opinion about how things are working at the Vatican or what they're looking for?
Well, great question. First of all, I need to emphasize that the ad limina has both administrative aspects and spiritual aspects. So the spiritual part of it was wonderful. I mean, we had an opportunity, all the bishops, to celebrate Mass at the major basilicas of Rome, which are fantastic, spectacular buildings to begin with, but their architecture and their art and history, just a beautiful, beautiful spiritual setting. So the spiritual part of it, I had an opportunity just by myself one afternoon to walk through St. Peter's Basilica, even though it was packed with tens of thousands of tourists, and St. Peter's can hold that many people. I had an opportunity just by myself to walk through St. Peter's, which was a splendid opportunity, and I visited some of the shrines that were important for me. I went to the Pietà shrine, and then to the shrine where Pope John Paul II is buried, then some time in the Blessed Sacrament Chapel. I had an opportunity to spend some time praying personally in the chapel at the Domus Santa Marta, where we were staying, where the Pope lives. A nice opportunity. So from a spiritual point of view, it was like a retreat. It was a wonderful opportunity to reflect on God's goodness and my own ministry and what I'm trying to do and the challenges, and just to express that sense of gratitude for how good God has been. But there were other excellent meetings too from an administrative point of view, the other dicasteries, as they call them, the other offices of the Vatican. Again, across the board, almost every possible topic you can think about in the church today, we covered in these various meetings.
I want to bring the conversation back to Rhode Island, and we have to hit up some sensitive topics here. And first, I want to focus in on Bristol. The Boston Globe's Amanda Malkovich revealed a long-running sex abuse scandal in Bristol, and it did reach to St. Mary's there, where the accused David Barboza was an administrator. Father Barry Gamache initially told the Globe he had never been warned, but church records tell a different story, and you were also aware of the investigations there. I guess my question is, and I think a lot of people in Bristol have the same thing, is why didn't the church take action?
Mm-hmm. Can't say too much about that because, frankly, I don't remember all the details. I didn't review that file coming in here today, so I don't remember all the details. It was a long and difficult story, as you know. It goes back decades in the town, in the city, with different departments and so forth. And yes, this gentleman was involved in the church for a number of years. I don't remember all the details. I can say this. I was there for Mass on Thanksgiving morning at St. Mary's, and Father Barry's doing a great job. He's well received, he's beloved, and the people are fine. I mean, they're doing very well. It's a beautiful parish, and whatever's happening in the town, it's somewhat beyond the scope of the church at this point, as I understand it. But again, I don't want to say too much because I don't remember all the details. I don't want to misspeak.
Just, your categorization, I don't know that everyone is fine in Bristol. Do you feel...
Well, I was speaking about my experience at the parish that morning.
Okay.
There was no difficulty, no problems at that point.
And I know it's tough to talk about it because there could be litigation, and everything, but fundamentally, do you feel like the church owes that community an apology?
Well, I think anytime there's an expression or some act of sexual abuse, we want to apologize for that and be very sorry for whatever part we may have played in it. Now again, as I recall, most of that situation involved other people in the town, not people in the church, not the pastor certainly, and not other people in the church itself.
My question is to the church's role in that. It was obviously more widespread.
Yeah, again, I don't remember all the details of that, so I'm hesitant to say too much about that. But anytime there's some act of sexual abuse that someone in the church, priest or educator or anyone else in the church is involved in some form of misconduct, yes, of course we want to apologize for that and say that we're sorry for whatever role we may have had.
On the same topic, Brian Amaral of the Providence Journal recently reported one of the priests on the credibly accused list is suing the diocese for defaming him, he alleges. Basically argues he was not given a real chance to defend himself before that list was put out. Do you have any regrets about, were those men given a chance to provide, other evidence before their names were put out there and were seen as, people, a scarlet letter?
Sure. Again, I'm hesitant to speak about any individual on the list. The list was published for a couple of reasons, as I said in my cover letter at the time, and was said many times since then. First of all, because I think there was a general societal expectation that the list be published. I think 80% of the dioceses in the country have published their list, I believe, something like that, and that may have changed since then. So there was a general expectation that we would do so. And secondly, we did so because people had the right to know what the history of sexual abuse has been in this diocese. So we went back, I think, to 1950, I believe. I forget the exact number. But we reviewed our files for a number of years, for a good number of years, and shared what we had in terms of credible allegations. As I said previously, and I think said it here last year, I believe, we didn't expect many surprises on that list. There were some, I think, that were not as well known as others, or perhaps not known at all, except within the files of the church. But we published the list for that sense of accountability and transparency. So I think all of the individuals, or most of the individuals on the list, were certainly aware that the list was coming. I think they knew that their names would be on the list because they had been previously publicized. That's why there weren't many surprises at all.
So you're comfortable that the people on those lists, it was the way it was handled, and that they were given a chance, or
I'm very comfortable with the way the list was handled. It's never perfect, of course, and it's a difficult exercise for everybody. It's a difficult exercise for the alleged perpetrators to have their names out there again. It's a difficult experience for those who were the victims and the survivors and their families. It's a difficult experience for other priests to have all this out there again. Difficult experience for me and for many other people. So it wasn't a fun thing to do. It wasn't an enjoyable thing to do. But I felt, for the sake of transparency and accountability, we had an obligation to do so.
Just real briefly on this topic to wrap it up. It looks like, looking at the list this morning, since July 1st when you released it, one name has been added. Have any names been removed?
Not that I know of, and again, I'm not dealing with that every single day. I don't think any names have been removed. I think the list is what the list has been, with that one additional name that was added. But as we said when it was published, if we get new information of more credible allegations, we will certainly add those and amend the list. Other thing to emphasize again, and we said this a number of times, having a name on the list doesn't prove guilt or innocence. It simply says, as a statement of fact, that we've received allegations that we have deemed to be credible. So it doesn't prove anything beyond that. Simply that we received allegations that we think were credible.
We have to go to a break pretty soon, but I'm going to push it probably 1 minute just for a final question here. St. Paul's Church was once again target of vandals throwing rocks through the stained glass windows there. The latest at the end of November. I don't know if it's happened again since, and it didn't make headlines, but look, the federal government is sometimes tapped to investigate potential hate crimes. Do you know if that's happened here?
I have no information that that's happened here, and again, it's a terrible thing for St. Paul's Church. It's a beautiful church, a great parish. We have no idea who did it or why they did it. It would be speculation to say it was a hate crime or not a hate crime, or just a random act of vandalism. It's happened twice that I'm aware of.
Right.
And I was there for Mass this Sunday after it happened, second time, just to offer some presence and some prayerful support to the parish. So we have no idea who did it or why it happened.
Okay, no, you haven't heard from the U.S. Attorney's Office
no,
on this one?
Like that.
Okay, yeah. Our guest this week is Bishop Thomas Tobin. Our conversation continues. Stay with us. You're watching Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. I'm Tim White. To my left, Eyewitness News reporter Ted Nesi. Our guest this week is Bishop Thomas Tobin. Ted?
Bishop, as Tim mentioned in the open, you published statistics before your ad limina visit to Rome, and even knowing how much the religious landscape has changed, they were somewhat startling. Since 2000, mass attendance in the Providence diocese is down 57%. The number of parishioners recorded by the parishes is down nearly 40%. Look, you've been the bishop for most of that period. Do you accept any share of the blame for the drop-off in Catholic practice in Rhode Island this century?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, keep in mind those broad numbers, the number of registered Catholics, the number of people attending Mass on Sundays, they're very broad numbers and they're very soft numbers. We really don't know how many Catholics there are in the state. It depends how you define that. We really don't know how many Catholics attend Mass every Sunday. The sacramental numbers are more documentable because they're registered in books when people
Marriages,
are baptized.
baptisms, yeah.
Exactly. So they're better numbers. However, there's no question there's been a drop off in registration. Our parishes and people attending Sunday Mass attendance. I suppose I share responsibility for that in some ways like everybody else does. And keep in mind, as I've tried to say this 100 times, this is not at all unique to Rhode Island or to the Diocese of Providence. It's happening throughout New England. It's happening throughout the Midwest. It's happening in the Mid-Atlantic states. Where it's happening in Canada and in Western Europe, where the decrease in numbers are far more dire than they are here. So I don't think I can be assessed with any personal blame for what's happening in the church around the world, in the Western world for sure. But we're part of that general cultural generational change, and it's not just affecting the Catholic Church, it's affecting religious communities in general. And people are not affiliating with religious communities the way they used to. So it's affecting us, certainly. It's affecting our parishes, our schools, our organizations, our enrollment and so forth. But it's not at all unique to Rhode Island. So do we all share some blame in that? Of course, it's a community problem. But is it unique to Rhode Island? Not at all.
You know, there'll be people watching today, Catholics, maybe lapsed Catholics ahead of Christmas. Maybe their family was hurt by the church. Maybe they were disgusted by the abuse crisis. You know, what's your pitch to that person today? Why should they go back to Mass? Why should they go to a service when they have clearly fallen off or something happened that led them to break away?
Sure, no, that's a great point for reflection. And we certainly understand if somebody's been hurt by the church, why they would drop away from the church or stop going to Mass. From a human point of view, that's very, very understandable. Why would they come back? Because of what the Mass offers. It's the presence of God, it's the body and blood of Jesus, it's the proclamation of God's word, the support of the community. There are so many wonderful things that to be gained by being involved in their parish, by being involved in the church, by attending Sunday Mass. They should be there. And if they've been hurt in some way, all we can do is apologize and very sincerely apologize and regret what's happened in the past, but also to move on in the future. Catholics have an obligation to go to Mass on Sundays, and we don't talk about that very often. Not just those involved who have been hurt in some way, but every Catholic has an obligation to attend Mass on Sundays. When we go to Mass on Sunday, we're not doing God a favor. We go to Mass because it's a divine obligation, and to be with the community, to hear the Word of God proclaimed, to receive the body and blood of Christ in the Eucharist. And if we stay away from that, we're only harming ourselves. So if someone's been harmed by the church, I would hope that they would give us a second chance and come back and to receive the inspiration and the forgiveness and the healing and the renewal that the Eucharist, especially in the Word of God, can give them.
Bishop, politics. In a tweet, you referred to the impeachment process of President Donald Trump as, quote, a political sideshow. Does that mean you oppose impeachment?
No, as I said in a second tweet too, in putting out that first tweet, I wasn't taking sides at all whether or not he should or should not be impeached or found guilty. And saying that it was a sideshow or a circus, I'm certainly not the first one or the only one to say that. It's just, I guess it bothered me at that point, and you guys would know better than I do, it's just become so very, very partisan. I think the outcome in the House of Representatives was predictable because it's run by the Democrats. And I think the outcome in the Senate will be predictable because it's run by the Republicans. So, and there's so much division, so much name calling going back and forth. in some ways it's become a very juvenile exercise of people throwing stones and calling people names and insulting one another. And again, I suppose I have my own personal opinions on what they should do with the president. And just a reminder too that, as I said publicly before, I didn't vote for President Trump for a couple reasons, and I probably would not vote for him again, although I have to see the alternatives, I suppose. So I'm not necessarily 100% in the President Trump camp, but just the process has been so divisive for our country and so predictable and so partisan. It's been discouraging.
By you weighing in on social media, which you've had sort of a rocky relationship with Twitter, I think it's safe to say.
It's safe to say.
Do you perpetuate that division? You're the bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Providence. You obviously have a big podium here, and when you weigh in like that, does it only add fuel to the fire?
Well, when you weigh in like that, what I said again.
Weigh in at all, period, full stop, right?
I suppose the option would be for me not to use Twitter at all. Or,
which you've tried.
Which I tried, and it might happen again sometime. Again, the involvement with Twitter is not a lifetime commitment necessarily. So if you like it, you use it. If you don't like it, you don't have to use it. So we'll see where that goes in the future. But no, I tried again, and I've used Twitter for religious purposes, for spiritual purposes, for personal greetings, for little human stories and so forth, things about the Steelers, things about my dog. So I use Twitter for lots of things, but certainly in this particular case, what I put out there was not partisan at all. I was talking about the process, which I and many, many other people have found to be very disconcerting.
We were taping Friday morning. Overnight, there was a lot of news about an editorial in the magazine Christianity Today, which is an evangelical publication, which was founded by Billy Graham and actually called for the president's impeachment, which took a lot of people by surprise because he has such strong support. I was just curious if you read the editorial and if you had any thought on.
I did not read the editorial. I saw the stories about the article, but I have not read it at all.
Another question off your Twitter feed, and one in your day job, which is you tweeted the other day, I think, a study about how long sermons are in different churches and stuff. And, talk about something that gets Catholics riled up. If they think the homily's too long, if they think the homily's bad, if they're not into it. How long do you think a good homily is? What do you recommend to your priests?
Well, it depends, of course, on the situation, the circumstances. Generally speaking, in the Catholic tradition, homilies are fairly brief. Now, what does that mean? Generally speaking, they're somewhere between 10, 12, 15 minutes. Keep in mind, in the Catholic tradition, the homily, the sermon, is only the first part, only one part of the liturgy. Very important part, and it should be well prepared and as engaging and effective as possible. But then we move on to the celebration of the Holy Eucharist, the Eucharistic prayer, the distribution of Holy Communion. That's part of every Mass, which is really the focus of our liturgy, is the celebration of the Mass and the Eucharist, distribution of the body and blood of Christ. So the homily is an important part, but it's not the only part. I think in many Protestant traditions, the homily, the sermon, is the main part of their worship service. So understandably, if they're going to be in church for an hour, their sermons might be 30 or 35 or 45 minutes. Typically in the Catholic Church, I would say 10 to 12 to 15 minutes is optimal. But it depends so much on who the preacher is and what's being said.
The diocese launched a big $50 million capital campaign about 2 years ago. It looked like you're going to hit that mark?
Yep. We're very, very close to the mark as we sit here today. I think by the time we get to the end of this calendar year, we'll be at or above $50 million. We're at 49.1 right now. I think the last printed information I saw. We have a few more parishes to be involved in the capital campaign. We have some major gifts still out there coming in we're aware of. So yeah, we're going to hit the 50 million plus, which is a wonderful, wonderful tribute to the people of this diocese.
Where is the largest expenses once you have the money? What are the biggest things that need to be paid for?
Well, almost all that money is being endowed. A portion of it, $4 to $5 million, I believe, is being set aside for renovations of our cathedral, maintenance. We've got some structural issues there, so that money will be in and out to take care of that. Everything else is being endowed for seminary and education, priest retirement, Catholic schools, Catholic charities. So all of that's going to be endowed and will pay benefits for the diocese for many, many years to come.
Go ahead.
you will reach the mandatory retirement age of 75.
This was my question.
I think it's 2020.
You seem pretty anxious to talk about my retirement.
No. 20. We leave it in God's hands. 2023, I think. Right? Do you expect still to lead the Providence Diocese through that year?
As you said, we'll sort of leave it in God's hands. I've been saying to myself, I will retire right after Tom Brady retires. Now, we don't know.
Could be this year.
Yeah, watch out.
Well, what we say by right after is very flexible. Let's face it, we're both reaching the end of the line, I suppose. No, it's in God's hands, but the policy of the church is that when a bishop turns 75, which will happen for me in 2023, every bishop has to submit his retirement. It may or may not be accepted right away. That's in the Pope's hands at that point. There are some mornings I wake up, I'd like to retire tomorrow. Other days I wake up and I think I could go for another 10 years. But no, at the age of 75, we have to submit a letter, and then it will be in the Pope's hands.
Bishop Thomas Tobin, Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas to you and to all of your viewers. God bless you.
And thank you again for coming on every year. We hope to see you again here next year. And to our viewers, Merry Christmas and a happy holidays to you. Ted and I will see you in the new year. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you on Newsmakers in 2020.